Hello everyone and welcome to this panel. I'm Francesco Rocchetti, ISPI Secretary General and the Director of the Rome Dialogues. As always, this event is part of the year-long initiative which will lead us to the 9th edition of the Rome Dialogues, the annual conference on the wider Mediterranean region co-promoted by us, ISPI, and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, taking place this year from November 2 to November 4. Well, today we're here to discuss and, in a way, problematize the role of new technologies and innovation. And in particular, we will look at if and how they can open new avenues for cooperation. Tech advancements, digital solutions, green transitions are already shaping economic policies and accelerating sustainable growth in the region. Innovation is intensifying. The interactions among the Mediterranean actors, we've seen it in many ways in the past year and the past years actually, contributing to economic diversification, new investments and employment opportunities. Startups, incubators and innovation hubs are flourishing across the region. Nevertheless, we can say it's not yet the Silicon Valley. There is a long way to go. And we're here to discuss a little bit more about this. And today I have the pleasure to talk about this potential and the challenges related to that with three distinguished speakers. First, Dana Gurovic, Chief Technology Officer, Israel Innovation Authority. Thank you, Dana, for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Then we have Giacomo Silvestri, Executive Chairman, Anyverse, and is also, of course, of the universe of E&I. Thank you, Giacomo, for being with us.
My pleasure. Good morning to everyone with us.
I think we can hear you not super well, so if, I don't know, the microphone is somewhere.
I will try to speak louder.
Just speak louder. Better. I think it's perfect. Yeah. Thank Fantastic. You. Yes. And then Mohammed Soliman, Director, Strategic Technologies and Cybersecurity Program at the Middle East Institute. Thank you, Mohammed, for being with us today.
Absolutely, it's a pleasure.
And thank you. I think I'll begin from you, just to give a geopolitical twist to the beginning of the discussion. I think what I would like to know from you is what's the connection between new technologies, innovation, and growing polarization in the international arena. Of course, this is a super broad question. I'll ask you to focus in particular on the MENA region. Thank you.
No, I think it's an important question. And remember, 6-7 years ago, you wouldn't have asked this question because a lot of things have changed. Number one, Washington has changed. From the Trump administration to the Biden administration, they perceive technology as outright a space for competition with China. It's more of a space for primacy. And we have seen that sort of competition manifest itself with the Clean Network Initiative launched by the Trump administration to crack down Huawei, ZTE, and other 5G equipment. So it started a new era where you have Washington telling allies and then partners that 5G is a space that Washington cares about, that's part of the competition. And China also engaged in that tit-for-tat strategy. And then moving forward, when people thought that the Biden team might reverse some of these policies, we ended up having some of the same, actually much more coherent strategy when it comes to competition and not only competing or cracking down companies, but actually cracking down on industries. From 5G to low orbit satellite to semiconductors, electrical vehicles, now all these emerging technologies are part of the competition, and we are treating as such. Back to your question about where the Middle East fit into this ecosystem of competition, it's actually a very unique space. The Middle East is, in my viewpoint, especially in the Gulf, is a middle space in terms of technology and IP between China and the East and Asia and the United States and Europe. So you have companies, you have low orbit satellite technologies coming from California, but you also have other technologies coming from China, from Shanghai. You have IP coming from America that's more about EV and about batteries. You have the same thing coming from China. So it's a melting pot in terms of IP and technologies coming from all around. So this is a good thing, but also challenging. A good thing because you always want to get the best, most affordable, cost-benefit technologies that you need for the Gulf economies to transform their economies and their diversified beyond oil. So this is a good thing, but at the same time, it makes you more worried about the geopolitical tensions. You had the Gulf countries being pressured into taking one side over the other when it comes to 5G and their cooperation with Huawei. It did not stop there. Now we have another wave of structure export control on semiconductors, which we all know is cornerstone to large language models. So I'm going to conclude by saying technology is competition. It's part of great power competition between the West and China. This is clear. The Middle East, who enjoyed for quite some time the idea of being a middle space between China, United States, and the West in terms of IP, is now feeling the pressure in terms of IP talent acquisition. And I think navigating that is going to be the biggest challenge for the Gulf and the Middle East.
Well, thank you, Mohammed, for this interesting picture you've given us about the Middle East. But I think what I would like to do now is to focus on one country. And today we've chosen Israel to focus a little bit. Since in the last years, Israel has been characterized by a very innovative ecosystem. And so I would like to ask to Dana how Israel is supporting entrepreneurship and feeding its innovation ecosystem, because it is something peculiar in the Middle East, I would say, in how it has been growing more startups in very, very big companies working in the technology field.
Yes, thank you for the question. I think it is really unique, and I think that it's quite famously known for being the startup nation. Israel, identified as a startup nation, and actually, it's also something that we see in the economic numbers in Israel. So, just to kind of to let you know that approximately 50% of our export comes from the technology sector in Israel, from the high-tech sector, which employs about 10% of the population and is actually in charge of 30% of our income tax in general. So that's really important because that shows how much of an impact that industry has. But it wasn't always like that. It's all started about, let's say, 40, 50 years ago, where there was a decision. It was a top-down decision from the government to start building new economic growth engines. And then they decided to open a new scheme. They called it the incubator scheme, where they opened technological incubators to support the development of new startups and companies. But I think that alone didn't make what we have today. It was because it happened in an environment where we had a whole ecosystem building around that. So we had the defense industry, which is obviously very significant in Israel, and all the people coming out of it with technological expertise, looking on how they can, build up new companies, how they can start and be part of something more high tech or technologically oriented. And together with that, it created a community. And I think the force really was the combination between the expertise from the industry and the army and the defense tech, as well as the community that was created. Israel is very small; everyone knows everyone, so there is a very strong feel of community here, and the non-dilutive funding that the government supported. And part of it is obviously our role in the Israel Innovation Authority. This is what we do. We give about $500 million in a year in non-dilutive funding directly to the Israeli ecosystem to continue and fuel it to grow even more.
Well, thank you, Dana. I'll now turn to Giacomo Silvestri because, of course, all companies like E&I are fueled by an ancient resource. Well, and today's all companies are driven forward by a relentless thirst for innovation. And this is what we can observe. Sometimes it's driven for a spirit of survival, because we know that oil is not something is granted for the future. And just actually today, I think the IEA released a report saying, well, we will see oil peaking before 2030, as previously said last year. I think they said 2030. This year, they anticipated a little bit the peaking point. But sometimes, of course, this is done for maintaining their leadership in the energy field. So what you can say, of course, from your perspective on which are your ways to secure an equally prosperous future for at least CNI, but in general for the oil field and oil companies?
Thank you very much, Francesco. And please tell me if the volume is okay, because I know I'm facing a little bit problem. So I worked before joining the oil and gas or the energy industry. I've been working for several industries in my past career, and let me say I've never seen something like what is happening now in the oil and gas and energy industry. The sector of the industry is facing an unprecedented time transformation. Is definitely a strategic transformation, a technology transformation, an industrial transformation, but even let me say a cultural transformation. In a nutshell, I can summarize saying that nothing that has been done in the last 20 years, in the past 20 years, will be done in the same way in the next 20 years. So basically, we need to and we have to change our skin on both sides. On the traditional business, the so-called natural resource business, the focus is completely shifting. Because of course the peak is still to come, but if in the past, I'll give you just two examples, we were focused on maximizing the production, now we maximize the production but bounded by the emission profile. So first comes the emission profile and then the maximization of production, or looking at our reservoir, before we were focusing in how to bring out from the soil something, now looking in the CO2 storage perspective, we look also how to put something else inside the soil. And this is just two examples on the traditional world, but at the same time, if we look forward in the new world, then the game is completely open. And there are challenging and innovation on each single business that we need to build back. On renewable, it's not just a matter of solar and wind, or wind, for example, the perspective of offshore wind, but there are also ENIs investing also, as you probably read, in more disruptive technology as the magnetic confined nuclear fusion. Or also we look and understand and we focus our research on how to gain some energy from the sea. Example, retail business, marketing business, oil and gas station, is a decreasing business. So there, the perspective is also to bring them to lead on a turnaround from traditional oil and gas station to a mobility hub. So the perspective is completely changed, or chemical that is turning into green chemical. These are just some examples to say that oil and gas company, I think, might decide different business strategy, but have in common a clear idea that is based on 2 points, that technology will stand at the core of the competitive advantage, and therefore innovation is at the core of our business strategy.
Thank you, Giacomo. I think you're doing your best with your voice because your volume is not great, but I got 100% what you said, and this is something very interesting, knowing that, of course, especially in the Mediterranean region, all companies have played a very major role in employing people first, and of course in energy innovations. And so let's see what they will do in the future. But to go back to Mohammed, I want to ask you a little bit a map of the most active players of innovation in the MENA region. We have heard the story of Israel, but it's not the only one. And so I think you can give us and you can provide us a little bit a map of who is driving innovation and which, of course, field of innovation.
Again, excellent question, and a question that I wouldn't have been asked a few years ago, which reflect of the times where we are. So I lived in Saudi Arabia for 2 years, or to be much more precise, I commuted between DC and Saudi Arabia for almost 2 years. And I have to tell you, Saudi Arabia and the UAE are going through massive digital transformation that's underappreciated. And no matter what you're reading, it doesn't capture where Saudi and the UAE are. I'm going to start by one fundamental fact. I mean, we're all talking about generative AI and how AI is going to change everything. The UAE and Saudi Arabia launched their own non-English large language models, massive investment. A few years ago, you have the UAE sending a mission to Mars. And this is a huge advantage and achievement on the technological and R&D level. You have Saudi Arabia last year is starting its own electrical vehicles brand, investing in rare earth metals, in own lithium batteries. I can go on and list some of the achievements that's taking place. But all these announcements that we keep hearing about large language models and the Emiratis going to Mars and the Saudis building their own low orbit satellite system and the also building electrical vehicles, it reflects where they are and how they think about their economies. Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia and the same thing in the UAE are looking beyond oil, and they want to transform themselves into innovation-based economies. And that means massive investment in emerging technologies and frontier technologies that are able to innovate their societies, number one. Number two, change the economic structure from a very reliant on energy prices into more service-oriented, more tech-oriented. And we have seen that first decoupling in Saudi Arabia when we had slowed down in the oil economy and oil growth that was not really reflected in the non-oil economy growth. So for the first time, you are seeing the Gulf countries moving ahead. And that clearly is going to have a spillover effect, not only on the Gulf, but also the rest of the region. Because Saudi Arabia and the UAE are a hub for talent, regional talent. A lot of the talent teams that are working in their universities, of course, Westerners, but not really that much. There are Lebanese and Syrians and Egyptians and Moroccans, and that for sure is going to have a spillover effect in the long term in their own home countries. So I would say UAE and Saudi Arabia are leading the way. I also say that there are some other countries that are a bit in betweeners. Of course, there is some sort of digital divide between where the Gulf is and the rest of the Levant, and you have North Africa. I would say Morocco is a very Morocco, Egypt, and Jordan are, I would say, second place in terms of where they are. They have existing talent, human resources. You also have existing ecosystem that have been built for the last 30 years. I mean, Morocco is very big on EV right now. It's huge. It's a massive success story. Same thing applies to the talent in Egypt in terms of software engineering. This is a huge thing, an advantage for Cairo, not only for the Middle East, but also for Africa. I would also say Jordan is a major success story as well, with its own ecosystem, even though it's a bit smaller than Egypt and Morocco, but always there. So this is basically the map. And then you have I would say, the left behind countries that have been doing great, or they should have been doing great, but civil war and political instability had created major problems for their innovation ecosystem that can apply to Iraq, Syria, and of course Yemen, Libya. So that's a bit of a sad story here. And this is basically the map that you're looking into.
You said on Morocco, EVs is a leader on electric vehicles. What you said?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't get it. Interesting. I didn't know that, and nice to hear that. I think now, Dana, we have explored a little bit what Israel is doing to supporting innovation, but can you drill down a little bit on and saying what are the most innovative sectors within the, let's say, Israeli innovation ecosystem, and if you can say something in particular on who is working on sustainability and sustainable growth, would be great.
Yes, so I'll start maybe with the most commonly recognized sector of innovation in Israel, and that's the software, obviously. So that's kind of the lead factor that Israel, I think, is mostly famous for in terms of the high-tech industry. So it involves different software angles. Part of them is cyber-oriented, part of them are more fintech or gaming or other applications of software. But and that's kind of the most commonly one. But other than that, we actually have other strong pillars of innovation that are located in Israel that we already see they're maturing over the years. So some of them are around the healthcare sector. So from there, we have a strong pillar of the medical devices industry. We had some great success stories with Mazor being sold to with like $1.3 billion. And there are other stories around that field where it's very sustainable. And other ones which are more new are around actually the food and the agro industry, which also connects to the sustainability or the how we look at the next phase of the technologies that we see in Israel. They're more deep tech and they're more oriented or where kind of the real needs are, the real world needs are. So in terms of food industry, we have a significant amount in general, the whole kind of food agro ecosystem currently in Israel consists about 660 companies, which about 30% of those are in the food industry and 70% of those are in the agriculture industry. And specifically in the food industry, there is a significant growth in all that is related to alternative proteins, alternative cultured meat, and things like that. So that is a specific vertical that is quite strong in Israel. There is a number of Israeli companies or companies that are joint ventures with Israel around the alternative proteins. And in the agro, there are also a significant growth. And so those are fields that we see that there are more and more growing in Israel. And we also, as a government, we want to make them grow even further. So we have national programs and we also have initiatives to promote more sustainable growth. So it also in terms of what they're doing. So we support more deep tech rather than just software, for example, and also in how they will do that. So we're trying to support them throughout the different stages that they grow. So we start by supporting them very kind of early on when they just spin out of the academia or they just want to establish a new company. And then obviously through the early phases of the company and of the startups where they are pre-seed and seed and even round A. But then we also have support schemes to support consortiums and infrastructure to then enable those companies to also have other services and other collaborations in Israel and also with partners outside of Israel to keep them growing. So it's not only that we support them early stage, we also try to support them, although the majority of the investment obviously comes from the private sector, and most of it actually comes from outside of Israel, the private sector outside of Israel, who invests in the Israeli ecosystem. But still, we want to make them grow even further by also collaborating with them through consortiums and collaborations and infrastructures that are also made for later stages.
Thank you, Dana. I now turn to Giacomo. Dana, you talked a lot about deep tech and how deep tech, how much you're investing in deep tech. With Giacomo, I would like to explore a little bit more what is happening around energy transition. We know that one of the main investors in energy transition technologies are actually big oil companies, as we said before. So what I would like to have from you is a little bit an idea of which are the most promising innovations. And in particular, we have received a question on mobility and transports. If you can focus a little bit on this, would be great.
Yeah, I try to change some setting. Do you hear me better or not?
Now, perfect. You're like a superstar.
No, I'm not. So fantastic. Glad to hear you. Let me focus, Francesco, on two sides that are pretty relevant for a corporate related to your question. So on one side, we, as I was saying before, I mean, the business is so changing that our approach, an innovation approach or technology approach on is, let me say, pretty holistic, because it affects the entire value chain, not only the most promising future technology, but also we try to change and decarbonize in order to be completely net zero in scope 3 by 2050. We try to decarbonize also all the traditional process. So our challenge as an oil and gas company, let me say, more than choosing or betting on the most promising technology of the future, is to be sure that we are able to intersect, to see, to catch all the innovation possible to change the entire values chain. How we do it? Basically, we do two approaches. On one side, we say to enlarge the reach. So we need to be able to see every place in the world where innovation pop up. That is not just Silicon Valley, is Israel, is MENA, is even southern part of Africa or the Far East. That's why we are trying to invest more and more in creating an innovation ecosystem, even establishing outpost or hub of our company in the most, let's say, relevant place of innovation in the world. That's a channel. The second levers is to, I was talking before about the cultural transformation. I mean, we are creating a vehicle and internal, let me say, pathway to accelerate innovation. And we do, again, in a very holistic, in a very integrated approach. I mean, we have established Joule, that is our internal accelerator, a sort of school of innovation that helps as an accelerator to fuel and to make it grow the most promising idea, typically early stage idea. And this is based in Italy. Or we have created and we have established a venture capital vehicle that is based in the US, in Boston. And here we are investing in the most promising technology, most disrupting technology, let me say, starting from early stage. But we also established Anyverse Venture, that I'm executive chairman of, that is a venture building vehicle that what we want to do is to leverage on our internal technology heritage in order to create more and more value around what we already have. So and of course, with all these things, together with the traditional open innovation approach, just to provide you a couple of figures, we have analyzed more than 2,500 startups in the last 12 months, and we kicked off internally project with startup and collaboration with startup in terms of more than 40 different projects in different areas. And coming to your question, retail is one of that. So what we are looking in the retail industry. Of course, the business is completely, and the mobility is completely changing. One point that is relevant, for example, just to provide an example to you, is knowing better our customer. We are a lot of customers, but those customers are not well known by the company, because in the past you just stopped for refuel your car. So we are investing in a lot of technology that help us in building a better customer relationship with our customer base, as well as, of course, all the topic around the electrical mobility, the charging station, and understanding how this space in the cities may become in a future with new services as a mobility hub where people may stop, refuel, recharge, and spend time in receiving different services from our company.
Thank you. And Giacomo, just a follow-up question. How are you dealing with, I mean, it's a very competitive environment in which everyone is trying to have these technologies, in which everyone is trying to discover, to acquire new companies. I mean, it's a very, I would say, difficult environment. You're head of innovation ecosystem at ENI, so I think you're dealing with this. Of course, you're a very big company, so you have a sort of a competitive advantage. You have a cash flow. You have, I mean, you have the potential to acquire new companies or find new, or find new companies. How you're dealing with this increasingly innovation, increasingly competitive environment? Because it must. I mean, I think it's not easy in general.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I will answer in a very.
Giacomo, can I
Yeah.
stop you? I think you just turned down the superstar mode, and now we can't hear you well as before.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me? No, not again. Let me check again.
Just yeah.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay.
Now it's perfect.
Okay, so I will answer in a very simple way. It's true. Competition is increasing, especially with the best startup. But I think startup are very interested in a solid partnership and cooperation. So the way we try to approach our cooperation with startup is on one side, not as a big corporate dealing with a small, tiny startup, but as a real partner. So we try to find together projects, development projects, research projects that are a win-win solution for both. And this is, to me, so the industrial proposition, I find it's very critical, fundamental, and relevant to establish this kind of dialogue with the startup, sometimes more than the financial perspective or the only financial perspective. Second, as a big industrial company, we can offer network in international perspective, technology that we leverage even from our internal technology, and not last but not least, assets that some other company are not in the capability to do it. So these are the two ingredients, I think, to win a cooperative competition, to win the competition in a cooperative way with startup.
Thank you. I think cooperation is the key for my third point to you, and I would begin again from Mohammed. I will ask you if you can give us again a picture, which is a little bit a geopolitical picture of the cooperation unfolding in the MENA region, which are the most interesting ways of cooperating among MENA countries.
Again, another important question. I would say the Gulf is a very special case. Part of it is we already have an existing framework, which is the GCC. So when they were under this sort of focal pressure over the 5G, they launched what we call the Open RAN initiative, and they already launched white papers talking about standardization on IP. So they're active in terms of how to manage some of the technology aspects. They started with the Open RAN initiative. Now we see more cooperation on low orbit satellite launch pads. I think with the launch of the India Middle East Europe corridor, you might find more mechanism in terms of talking about internet cables and green hydrogen, generally speaking. So the Gulf is a bit different because it's a trade hub. So they already established many of the working groups that's needed. I think what's missing is, even though the Gulf domestically, like among its own states, they have been building tech dialogues with India and to some extent China, even though it's a bit informal, we don't really have the same mechanism with the EU and US. For example, you have the EU-US TTC, the Trade and Technology Council. You have the EU-India TTC. So I think you should treat Brussels should treat the Gulf in a similar manner, especially again when you are meeting investors. We're going to Riyadh, we're going to Abu Dhabi. This is where the next $1 billion unicorn is coming from. This is where the investment is. So you should not just treat them as just an ATM or cash. They are countries with growing innovation, and they are building massive not only just infrastructure, like ecosystem talent. And that generation of Gulf leaders, I mean, holy moly, those are extremely well adjusted to this new reality of multipolar world. They understand what's happening in Asia. When I'm always in Riyadh, I never got any questions about Europe or US. The questions I always get is, tell us more about Samsung. What's happening in Korea? What's happening in Vietnam? I heard that there's some sort of supply chain issues around Indonesia. Shipyard. So they're looking into tech is cornerstone to their thinking and their positioning. And I think what's missing is building that sort of framework with Brussels. And I would even argue, if you're asking about building a Mediterranean ecosystem of innovation, you should have another TTC for the Mediterranean nations. You should have something where you're bringing ministers and officials who are working on the tech ecosystem together. You start with telecommunication, but you end up going into the low orbit satellite questions regarding integration of EV manufacturing. I think you have a lot of synergies that exist, even with the current disparity and the current different level of innovation among the countries in the Mediterranean ecosystem. You should start somewhere. And I think having a technology council with the Gulf and with the Mediterranean, I think this is going to be a good start.
Thank you. We're getting some questions, so I'll turn to Dana just to ask you a little bit, on the cooperation Israel is having in the region and in which programs you have active right now. And I will ask you also to answer to a question that just came on universities and what's your relation and Israel relations with the universities. Normally, universities are the house of many talents who are needed to feed the innovation ecosystem. How is Israel dealing with universities?
Okay, so I'll try and answer that. That's kind of two questions, so I'll try and tackle them separately. But first, I think that when we are looking at different aspects of collaboration, I think it's important to find identical challenges that both countries or entities kind of feel that they're struggling with. And then from that point, it's much easier to do something very focused for a collaboration. For example, if we look at climate tech, which is obviously global, even a pandemic, let's say this way, but a global challenge, we also can identify within that big scope specific vectors where we can collaborate with countries that are more, it's more relevant for them. For example, we have working a lot on the desert tech aspect of climate, which is also something that is relevant for other countries around the Middle East. But other than that, we have specific collaborations through Prima. It's a kind of a scheme that we are part of, as well as being other members of other parts as Horizon, more European oriented schemes. We also have bilateral funds, which we open specifically with different countries, where we co-fund projects coming from the different countries. So we fund, let's say, the Israeli part of the collaboration, and then the other country funds their part of the collaboration of the startups. So we also look at, as I mentioned, agriculture and water supply and all of that in terms of collaborations with our neighboring countries, and we have significant now connections with the UAE, of course, after the Abraham Accords. And going to the second question about the universities. So Israel has, fortunately, several very strong universities, which we are constantly working on, looking how we can do more translational research. So, for example, the Israel Innovation Authority, the way we fund is that we fund only projects that are ready to move from early stage in the academia towards the industry. So we fund that translation, where we actually fund both the academic partner and the company that wants to take that technology into a development in the industry. So, and other than that, we also involve a lot of the, by funding, obviously, a lot of the academia with consortia consortiums where they have a hand-in-hand introductions, and actually they work together with big companies, with startups, and their own labs. So that's another aspect of their kind of how we want to pull the knowledge from the universities towards the industry in Israel. And so we do it in kind of in different schemes. And one last thing that I would say is that we also have identify things that we think that are important on a national level, and then we do a top-down kind of approach. For example, the latest program that we have approved about a year ago is around bioconvergence, which is our way to look at the change that the going to happen because of the bioeconomy that's going to enter more and more applications in our lives. So this is something that we decided that we want to tackle top down. And from that perspective, we tackle it through also looking at the human capital training. So it's within the university, but it's also outside the university. So we have been supporting and funding human capital training, for example, for multidisciplinary research in specifically bioconvergence, to promote that integration between the siloed part that they study in the university towards the multidisciplinary industry that we want to create here.
Thank you, Dana. I would like to know whether Giacomo, E&I has a strong relation with international universities. I know with Italian, and you're trying to get talents from Italian universities. Is there some ways you try to collaborate also with international universities and get talents from them?
Definitely, yes. Of course, we cooperate not only with the Italian one, but also international one. And so far, we mainly focus on top of the European one on the US. Especially, we have a long-lasting relationship with the MIT, and now we are consolidating in a relevant relationship with Stanford. But I mean, we are an international company, and definitely our hiring and look for talent is global and international by definition.
No, it's very interesting, and I think I have many questions. I think since the time is finishing for our conversation, I will turn to Mohammed for the last question, which says, in the past year, we have seen investments in semiconductor production by countries such as Turkey, Qatar, and Oman. What kind of opportunities could this sector open for the MENA region? And is it too late to invest in semiconductors for this region?
Again, not an easy answer here. So I'm going to put my hat as engineer than a policy analyst. This industry is not only extremely difficult, it's extremely consolidated supply chain. Very, very consolidated. You always read the headlines in New York Times and Wall Street Journal that most of the production, manufacturing actually is taking place in Taiwan. So we already have an existing infrastructure that's and already under a lot of pressure that we have in the United States are trying to bring some of this supply chain back home in Arizona and Ohio. Just to make sure that there is some segment of our semiconductor consumption is a bit secure and resilient. But that doesn't mean that consolidation of the semiconductor manufacturing will end soon. I don't believe so. I don't think anything is too late. I think when it comes to technology, you should invest. You should much be more proactive. However, they also should be aware of the current market dynamics that exist. To give an example, the only UE owns majority stakes in Global Foundries. And Global Foundries is an major American semiconductor manufacturer. You didn't hear or see that Global Foundries will launch a fab inside the EU. It's difficult, a lot of tech, it's a questions of IP. There's a lot of things there. I welcome research on R&D, but I also want capitals to be more realistic and clear-headed about these sort of initiatives. R&D is good, but major capital investment in these initiatives should be clear-headed and make sure that you're part of an ecosystem instead of going on your own and then have a major loss in the future.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think today we tackled a little bit innovation, and I think it's important because it is a growing part of the MENA story. We have used, and we still work a lot. Everybody works a lot on the security side of the MENA region, but we've seen a growing prosperity, innovation, technology side of the MENA region unfolding. It's something we are trying to explore also as ISPI, as Rome Dialogues. It's something not easy because as you have seen today, it's something that crosses geopolitics and goes to companies and innovation authorities and has many actors behind that. It's not like just security. Behind security, you have security guys, geopolitical people, but it's a more complex picture, but it's very interesting, and we will explore it also during our Med Dialogues in a month. And we're glad to have this conversation with Dana, Giacomo, Mohammed. So I thank you for being with me and with us today, and I hope you will see each other at MED and at least in the future to speak more about innovation and its role in the region. Thank you.
Thank you.